My chest felt tight, that familiar pressure that had nothing to do with my cancer this time. When my sister Claire walked into my living room uninvited and said the words that would shatter what was left of our family. "You need to share that money with us, because family shares everything." I remember that moment with painful clarity, the way you remember a car accident in slow motion. It was a Tuesday morning in March, about 6 weeks after my Uncle Benjamin's funeral, 8 months after my final chemotherapy treatment, and exactly 3 days after I had received confirmation that the $8 million he left me had cleared probate and was now sitting in my bank account. I was drinking coffee from the blue ceramic mug my uncle had given me years ago, the one with a chip on the handle that I refused to replace because he had drunk from it too. The morning sun was streaming through my kitchen window, hitting the dust particles in the air, making them dance like tiny witnesses to what was about to unfold. I was 67 years old, a breast cancer survivor, recently widowed, and suddenly wealthy beyond anything I had ever imagined. And I was about to discover that money does not solve problems. It just reveals who people really are. My Uncle Benjamin had been more than an uncle to me. He had been a father figure after my own father died when I was 12, a mentor when I was building my nursing career, a friend during my darkest days when breast cancer tried to take everything from me. Benjamin was my mother's younger brother, a brilliant man who had never married, who had made his fortune in software development back in the 80s and 90s, before anyone really understood what tech money would become. He lived simply, despite his wealth, in a modest house filled with books and music, driving the same old Volvo for 20 years, wearing sweaters with holes in the elbows, never flashing his money or making anyone feel small because they had less. He had helped me through my cancer treatment in ways my own siblings had not. When I was too sick from chemo to work, when my late husband Tom's insurance did not cover everything, when medical bills were piling up faster than I could manage them, Uncle Benjamin quietly paid them. He never made a big deal of it, never made me feel like a charity case. He would just call and say he had taken care of the hospital bill, or the specialist copay, or the medication costs. And when Tom died suddenly of a heart attack 2 years into my cancer battle, leaving me alone and grieving and terrified, Uncle Benjamin was the one who showed up. Not my siblings, him. My sister Claire and my brother Daniel had been busy with their own lives during my cancer years. Claire lived 3 states away with her husband and adult children, had a comfortable life funded by her husband's dental practice, and visited maybe twice during my 18 months of treatment. She sent cards, called occasionally, expressed sympathy in that distant way people do when they are not really present. Daniel was closer geographically, but equally absent emotionally. He had his own financial struggles, a failed business, a contentious divorce, adult children who did not speak to him. He asked to borrow money from me twice during my treatment, small amounts I could not really afford to give, but did anyway because he was my brother. He never paid me back. Neither of them understood what it was like to face your own mortality at 65, to lose your husband in the middle of fighting for your life, to be so alone that the only person who showed up consistently was your elderly uncle. Uncle Benjamin died at 89, peacefully in his sleep, the way everyone hopes to go. I was devastated, but also grateful he had not suffered, had not endured the indignity of decline. His funeral was small. He had outlived most of his friends, and his family was just us, his 3 nieces and nephews. I gave the eulogy because Claire and Daniel barely knew him anymore, had not maintained relationships with him the way I had. I talked about his kindness, his quiet generosity, his brilliant mind, his terrible jokes. I cried through the whole thing, mourning not just my uncle but the end of an era, the last connection to my mother who had died a decade earlier, the loss of the one person who had truly seen me and loved me unconditionally. The will reading happened 2 weeks later. Uncle Benjamin's attorney, a man named Gerald Hoffman, who had known my uncle for 40 years, gathered the 3 of us in his office. I expected a simple division, 3 nieces and nephews, 3 equal shares, standard estate planning. But that was not what Uncle Benjamin had done. Gerald read through the preliminaries, various charitable donations, gifts to his housekeeper and gardener, specific personal items designated for specific people. Then he got to the main bequest. To my niece Margaret Ann Sullivan, Gerald read, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including all financial assets, real estate holdings, and investment portfolios, estimated at approximately $8 million. This bequest is made in recognition of her exceptional care and companionship during the final years of my life, her unwavering support during her own health crisis, and her embodiment of the values I hold most dear: kindness, integrity, and selfless service to others. To my nephew Daniel and niece Claire, I leave $50,000 each, with my sincere hope that they will use these funds wisely. The silence in that office was absolute. I sat frozen, not comprehending, not believing what I had just heard. $8 million. To me, only to me. Claire and Daniel got $50,000 each, generous amounts by any normal standard, but nothing compared to $8 million. I looked at my siblings. Claire's face was white, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide with shock. Daniel looked angry, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so hard his knuckles were white. Gerald continued reading. He explained that Uncle Benjamin had been very clear in his instructions, had updated his will 6 months before his death with full mental capacity and clear intentions. He had left a letter for me, Gerald said, handing me a sealed envelope with my name written in my uncle's familiar handwriting. He had also left brief letters for Claire and Daniel, which Gerald distributed to them. I did not open my letter in that office. I could not with my siblings' eyes on me. Not with the tension so thick you could feel it pressing against your skin. We left separately. No discussion, no acknowledgement of what had just happened, just 3 people walking to their cars in stunned silence, processing a family earthquake that had just destroyed whatever foundation we thought we were standing on. I drove home in a daze, the sealed envelope sitting on my passenger seat like it was radioactive. When I finally got to my small house, the same house Tom and I had bought 35 years ago, the same house where I had raised my children, the same house where I had been sick and scared and alone, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my uncle's letter. His handwriting was shaky but legible, the writing of an old man who knew his time was limited. "My dearest Margaret," it began, "if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are probably shocked by my will. Let me explain. You were the only one who truly cared about me as a person, not as a potential inheritance. You visited me every week for years, not because you wanted something, but because you enjoyed my company and I enjoyed yours. When you got sick, when Tom died, when your world was falling apart, you still made time for me. You still checked on me. You still treated me like I mattered. Claire and Daniel are not bad people, but they are selfish people. They forgot about me, except when they needed something. Daniel asked me for money 3 times over the years. Loans he never intended to repay and did not. Claire invited me to family events only when it was convenient for her, treated me like an obligation rather than a human being. I am leaving them something because they are family, but I am leaving you everything else because you earned it, because you deserve security after what you have been through, because I trust you to use it wisely and with the same generous spirit you have always shown. Do not let them guilt you. Do not let them claim this is unfair. Life is not about equal distribution. It is about rewarding the people who show up, who care, who make sacrifices. You showed up for me, Margaret. Now I am showing up for you. Use this money to live well, to help others, to finally have the security and comfort you have always deserved. And do not apologize for it. Love, Uncle Benjamin. I cried reading that letter, cried with grief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. My uncle had seen me, had valued me, had understood that I had needed help and support during the darkest period of my life. But I also felt dread, because I knew this inheritance would destroy my relationship with my siblings, would create resentment and conflict that might never heal. And I was right to feel that dread, because 3 days later, Claire showed up uninvited with her demands. She had let herself in through my back door. She still had a key from when I was sick and needed people to check on me, and walked into my living room where I was reading the newspaper, drinking my coffee, trying to adjust to this new reality of being suddenly wealthy. She did not say hello or ask how I was doing. She just launched right in. "You need to share that money with Daniel and me," she said, standing over me with her arms crossed, her expression hard. "Family shares everything. Uncle Benjamin was our uncle too, and it is not fair that you get 8 million while we get almost nothing." I set down my coffee mug carefully, my hand shaking slightly, that old cancer treatment tremor that still appeared when I was stressed. "Almost nothing," I repeated. You got $50,000 each. That is not nothing, Claire. It is nothing compared to $8 million, she shot back. And you know it is not right. We are all his nieces and nephews equally. We should have gotten equal shares. This is just Uncle Benjamin playing favorites because you manipulated him when he was old and vulnerable. That word, manipulated, hit me like a slap. I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. I did not manipulate anyone, I said, my voice shaking now. I loved Uncle Benjamin. I took care of him because I cared about him, not because I wanted his money. Where were you when he was lonely? Where were you when he needed rides to doctor appointments? Where were you during the last 5 years of his life? I was living my life, Claire said defensively. I have a family, responsibilities. I could not just drop everything to babysit an old man. He was not just an old man, I said, standing up now, facing my sister. He was our uncle. He was Mom's brother. And you treated him like he was an inconvenience instead of a person who deserved love and attention. Claire's expression hardened. This is not about who visited more or who called more, she said. This is about fairness, about family, about doing the right thing. And the right thing is to split that inheritance 3 ways, $2.5 million each, roughly. That is fair. That is what Mom would have wanted. Bringing up our mother was a low blow, and Claire knew it. But little did I know. This was just the opening salvo in a campaign that would test everything I believed about family, loyalty, and what we owe each other. I told Claire I needed time to think, which was really code for, I need you to leave my house so I can process this ambush. She left, but not before making it clear that she and Daniel were united in their position, that they had already discussed it, that they expected me to do the right thing. The phrase "the right thing" echoed in my head long after she left. The right thing according to whom? According to siblings who had not shown up when I needed them? According to people who saw our uncle as nothing more than a potential inheritance? Daniel called that evening. His approach was different from Claire's, less confrontational, more manipulative. He talked about his financial struggles, his alimony payments, his adult kids who would not speak to him. He talked about how this money could change his life, could give him a fresh start, could solve all his problems. He never directly demanded I share, but the implication was clear. If I really cared about him, if I was really a good sister, I would help him out of the generosity of my windfall. I listened to him for 20 minutes, saying very little, feeling something inside me shift and harden, because what I was hearing was not a brother asking for help. It was a brother who felt entitled to money that was not his, who saw my inheritance as somehow communal property, who believed that family obligation meant I should sacrifice my security for his comfort. And I realized in that moment that my siblings did not see me as a person who had survived cancer, who had lost her husband, who had struggled financially for years while they lived their comfortable lives. They saw me as someone who had gotten lucky, who now had an obligation to level the playing field, to make things fair according to their definition of fair. I did not commit to anything during that call. I told Daniel I was still processing everything, still grieving Uncle Benjamin, still trying to understand what this inheritance meant for my future. He was disappointed. I could hear it in his voice, but he backed off, probably thinking he could wear me down over time with repeated requests and guilt trips. But I was thinking about my uncle's letter, about his explicit instructions not to let them guilt me, about his clear statement that life is not about equal distribution, but about rewarding the people who show up. And I was thinking about the 18 months of chemotherapy, the fear, the pain, the loneliness, the financial stress that had made everything worse. I was thinking about Tom's funeral, which Claire had attended but left early because she had other obligations, which Daniel had skipped entirely because he was dealing with his divorce. I was thinking about all the times I had needed my siblings, and they had not been there. Not really. Not in the ways that mattered. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. Claire called regularly, always with the same message. Family shares everything. It is the right thing to do. Mom would have wanted us to be equal. Uncle Benjamin must have been confused, or I must have influenced him. Daniel sent emails, long rambling messages about fairness and family values, and how hurt he was that I was not immediately agreeing to split the inheritance. They even recruited their adult children, my nieces and nephews, to call me, to add their voices to the chorus of people telling me I was being selfish, greedy, unfair. I stopped answering the phone unless I recognized the number. I stopped checking email except for essentials. I felt under siege in my own life, like I was being punished for receiving a gift I had never asked for, had never expected, had never manipulated anyone to receive. The inheritance that was supposed to bring security was bringing only conflict, stress, guilt, and the painful revelation that my siblings valued money more than they valued me. I made an appointment with a therapist during this time, a woman named Dr. Caroline Reeves who specialized in family dynamics and grief counseling. I needed someone objective, someone outside the family drama, someone who could help me think clearly about what I wanted and what I owed. Dr. E. Reeves listened to my story over several sessions, asked thoughtful questions, helped me untangle my feelings of guilt from my actual obligations. One thing she said stuck with me. "Margaret," she asked, "if you give them each $2.5 million, will your relationship improve? Will they suddenly become the siblings you needed during your cancer? Will they start showing up, caring about you as a person, treating you with the love and respect you deserve? Or will they just take the money and disappear until they need something else?" I knew the answer immediately. They would take the money and disappear. This was not about relationship. This was not about healing family bonds or creating closeness. This was purely transactional. They wanted money they believed they were entitled to, and once they got it, nothing else would change. I would still be the sister who had survived cancer alone. They would still be the siblings who had not shown up. The only difference would be that I would have given away $6 million that my uncle had specifically intended for me, that he had carefully planned to ensure I received, that represented his love and care and recognition of my worth. Dr. Reeves also helped me understand something else, that saying no is not selfish, that boundaries are healthy, that I did not owe my siblings access to an inheritance that was legally and morally mine. She helped me see that my guilt was not based on any actual wrongdoing on my part, but on a lifetime of conditioning to put others first, to be the peacemaker, to sacrifice my own needs for family harmony. And she gently pointed out that this conditioning had not served me well during my cancer battle, when I had needed my family to put me first for once, and they had not. Armed with this clarity, I decided to meet with Claire and Daniel in person, to have one final conversation where I would state my position clearly and without apology. I invited them to my house on a Saturday morning, made coffee, set out some pastries I had bought from the bakery Uncle Benjamin used to love. I was nervous but determined, 67 years old, and finally ready to stand up for myself in a way I had never quite managed before. They arrived together, clearly having coordinated, clearly presenting a united front. We sat in my living room, the same room where I had read my uncle's letter, where I had cried through so many dark days, where I had slowly rebuilt my life after cancer and widowhood. And I told them my decision. "I am not splitting the inheritance," I said simply. Uncle Benjamin left it to me for specific reasons, which he explained clearly in his will and in a personal letter. I loved him. I cared for him. I was there for him when neither of you were. This is not about fairness as you define it. This is about honoring his wishes and accepting that he made choices based on our actual relationships with him, not on some abstract idea of equal distribution. Claire's face flushed red. "So you are just going to keep $8 million while your own siblings struggle," she said, her voice rising. "That is who you are now? That is what cancer and widowhood turned you into? A selfish woman who does not care about family?" I took a breath, staying calm despite the attack. "I do care about family," I said. "But I have learned that family is not just about sharing resources. It is about sharing presence, support, love. Where were you when I was going through chemo? Where was either of you when Tom died and I was alone and terrified? You sent cards, made brief phone calls, showed up occasionally when it was convenient. But Uncle Benjamin was there, every week, every crisis, every moment I needed someone. So yes, he left me his money, because I was his family in the ways that actually mattered." Daniel leaned forward, his expression earnest, almost pleading. "Maggie," he said, using the childhood nickname he had not called me in years, "you are right that we should have been there more. We made mistakes, but does that mean we should be punished financially? Does that mean we do not deserve anything just because we were not perfect siblings? This is not about punishment," I said quietly. "And you are not getting nothing. Uncle Benjamin left each of you $50,000, which is generous by any standard. This is simply about respecting his wishes. He wanted me to have security after everything I went through. He wanted me to be taken care of. And I am going to honor that, because I loved him and because honestly, I deserve it. I deserve security. I deserve not to worry about money for the first time in my life. I deserve this gift that my uncle carefully planned for me. Claire stood abruptly. Fine, she said coldly. Keep the money, but do not expect us to stay in your life. Do not expect us to be at your birthday dinners or holiday celebrations. Do not expect us to care when you need something. You have made your choice. Money over family. Now live with it. They left then, both of them, slamming my door with enough force to rattle the windows, and I sat in the sudden silence of my empty house, feeling something complicated. Sadness, yes, but also relief, liberation, a strange sense of peace. Because the truth was, they had not been at my birthday dinners or holiday celebrations for years anyway. They had not cared when I needed something during cancer. Their threat to withdraw was meaningless because they had already withdrawn long ago. I was just finally acknowledging it and refusing to pay them to pretend otherwise. But little did I know, their departure from my living room that day was not the end of the story. It was actually just the beginning of discovering who my real family was and what inheritance truly means. The weeks following that confrontation were strange. I felt lighter, freer, but also sad in a way I had not expected. I was mourning the final death of a fantasy I had held on to for decades. The fantasy that my siblings and I had close relationships, that we were the kind of family who supported each other unconditionally, that blood ties meant something deeper than legal obligation and occasional phone calls. The inheritance had not created the distance between us. It had just exposed distance that had always existed, made visible the reality I had been too loyal or too hopeful to fully see. I started thinking seriously about what to do with the money. $8 million, even after taxes and estate fees, was more than I could spend in my remaining lifetime, even if I lived extravagantly, which was not my nature. Uncle Benjamin had given me not just security, but opportunity, the chance to make choices based on values rather than necessity, to help others, to create positive change in ways I had never been able to afford before. I met with a financial advisor, a woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in sudden wealth management. She helped me understand investment strategies, tax implications, estate planning considerations. She also asked me deeper questions about my values, my goals, what I wanted my life to look like, what kind of legacy I wanted to leave. These conversations helped me move from feeling guilty about the inheritance to feeling responsible for it, like I had been entrusted with resources that should be used wisely and meaningfully. One of the first things I did was pay off my mortgage, a small thing in the context of $8 million, but profoundly meaningful to me. This house, where Tom and I had raised our children, where I had survived cancer, where I had rebuilt my life, was now truly mine, with no bank holding claim to it. I cried the day the final payment cleared, overwhelmed by the security of knowing I would never lose my home, never have to worry about making payments, never face the fear that had haunted me during my sickest days when I could barely work. Then I started thinking about causes Uncle Benjamin had cared about: literacy, education, medical research. I set up a charitable fund in his name, designated to support cancer research and patient assistance programs. I remembered the financial stress of treatment, the bills that kept coming, the medications I could barely afford, the way poverty and illness combined to create suffering beyond the disease itself. If my uncle's money could help even one person avoid that suffering, could pay for someone's chemotherapy or cover someone's surgery, it would be money well spent, a legacy that honored his memory in practical, meaningful ways. I also thought about my own children, my son Robert and my daughter Lisa, both in their 40s now, with families of their own. They had been supportive during my cancer, visiting regularly, helping with practical needs, loving me well. They had not asked about the inheritance, had not demanded shares or made claims. When I told them about Uncle Benjamin's will, they had been happy for me, relieved that I would have security, unconcerned about what it meant for their eventual inheritance from me. They were good people who had become good adults, and I decided to help them in immediate ways rather than making them wait until my death. I paid off Robert's mortgage. He and his wife had been struggling with high payments, and eliminating that debt gave them breathing room, reduced stress, improved their quality of life. I set up education funds for each of Lisa's 3 children, ensuring my grandchildren could attend college without the burden of student loans. I helped both my children in other ways too, covering unexpected medical bills, enabling home repairs they had been delaying, giving them the gift of financial stability without the strings or conditions my siblings had tried to attach to our relationship. My children were grateful, but also concerned. They asked if I was sure, if I was keeping enough for myself, if I understood that I did not owe them anything. And I told them the truth, that helping them brought me joy, that I was keeping plenty for my own security, that this was my choice made freely because I loved them, and they had been there for me when I needed them most. The difference between their response and my siblings' response was striking. My children saw the inheritance as mine to do with as I chose, while my siblings saw it as communal property they were entitled to access. About 3 months after our final confrontation, I received a certified letter from an attorney representing Claire and Daniel. They were contesting Uncle Benjamin's will, claiming he had lacked mental capacity when he wrote it, claiming I had unduly influenced him, claiming the distribution was so unequal it suggested something improper had occurred. The letter demanded I agree to mediation with the goal of reaching a more equitable distribution, or they would file a formal lawsuit. I felt sick reading that letter, felt betrayed and hurt and angry in ways I had not fully felt before, because this was not just about money anymore. They were attacking my uncle's memory, questioning his competence, suggesting I had manipulated a dying man. These were lies, vicious lies, but they were lies my siblings were willing to tell in court if it meant getting access to money they felt entitled to. I called my attorney immediately. I had retained one when the inheritance first came through, knowing there might be complications. Her name was Diana Foster, a estate litigation specialist who was brilliant, experienced, and reassuring. She reviewed the letter, asked me detailed questions about my uncle's mental state in his final months, about our relationship, about any evidence of undue influence or incapacity. "Margaret," she said after reviewing everything, "this is a nuisance suit. Your uncle was sharp as a tack right up until his death. He updated his will with his own attorney of 40 years, who will testify to his complete competence. He left detailed explanatory letters showing clear reasoning and intent. He had proper witnesses, proper documentation, everything done legally and correctly. Your siblings have no case. They are just hoping you will settle to avoid litigation." "Will we have to go to court?" I asked, dreading the prospect of public family drama, of having to testify about why I deserved the inheritance while my siblings did not. "Probably not," Diana said. "I will file a motion to dismiss based on lack of merit. Most likely, once your siblings realize they will have to pay legal fees for a case they cannot win, they will drop it. But be prepared for this to get uglier before it gets better. When people feel entitled to money, they can become very creative with accusations and very persistent in their claims." She was right about it getting uglier. Over the next few weeks, Claire and Daniel spread stories within our extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, family friends, claiming I had stolen their inheritance, manipulated a vulnerable old man, turned Uncle Benjamin against them. Some of these relatives believed the stories, stopped speaking to me, sided with my siblings in a conflict they knew nothing about. Others reached out to me privately, asking for my side, offering support, recognizing the situation for what it actually was. I found myself explaining the same things over and over, that Uncle Benjamin had been competent, that I had not influenced him, that he had made his own choices based on our actual relationships, that my siblings had not been present in his life or mine when it mattered. Some people understood. Some people did not care to understand, and some people just wanted to avoid the whole messy situation and withdrew from everyone involved. The legal case moved forward slowly, as legal cases do. Diana filed her motion to dismiss, which was detailed and thorough, documenting every aspect of Uncle Benjamin's competence and the legitimacy of his will. Claire and Daniel's attorney responded with allegations, but no actual evidence, just claims and suppositions and twisted interpretations of ordinary interactions. The judge scheduled a hearing to determine whether the case had enough merit to proceed to trial. I had to prepare testimony, had to gather evidence, had to revisit every moment of my relationship with my uncle to prove it had been genuine and not manipulative. It was exhausting and humiliating and deeply painful. I found myself questioning things I had never questioned before. Had I visited Uncle Benjamin too often? Had my acceptance of his help during cancer created an inappropriate obligation? Had I somehow manipulated him without meaning to, without realizing it? "Doctor," Reeves, my therapist, helped me reality check these spiraling thoughts. Margaret, she said firmly, visiting someone regularly because you love them is not manipulation. Accepting help when you are sick and struggling is not creating obligation. Maintaining a close relationship with a family member is not a scheme to secure inheritance. Your siblings are rewriting history to justify their sense of entitlement. Do not let their narrative become your narrative. The hearing finally happened on a cold day in November, nearly 6 months after Uncle Benjamin's death. I sat in the courtroom with Diana, facing my siblings who sat with their attorney on the other side. We had not spoken since that day in my living room, and seeing them across the courtroom felt surreal, like we were characters in someone else's drama, rather than actual siblings who had once been close, who had shared a childhood, who had loved each other before money and resentment poisoned everything. The judge was a man in his 60s, with gray hair and a stern expression that suggested he had seen every variety of family conflict and was not impressed by any of them. He listened as Claire and Daniel's attorney presented their case, allegations of undue influence, suggestions of cognitive decline, arguments that the distribution was so unequal it could only be explained by improper behavior on my part. Then Diana presented our response. She called Uncle Benjamin's longtime attorney, Gerald Hoffman, who testified about my uncle's sharp mind, his clear intentions, his detailed explanations for his choices. She presented medical records showing no cognitive decline, no dementia, no mental impairment of any kind. She presented documentation of the regular contact I had maintained with Uncle Benjamin, weekly visits noted in his calendar, phone records showing daily calls, receipts from restaurants where we had eaten together, photos from family gatherings and ordinary days that showed a genuine, affectionate relationship. And she presented Uncle Benjamin's letter to me, which he had specifically noted in his will could be used as evidence if needed. The judge read it carefully, his expression neutral, but his eyes sharp, evaluating every word. Then he asked to see the letters Uncle Benjamin had left for Claire and Daniel. These letters were shorter, more formal. They acknowledged Claire and Daniel as family, expressed hope that they would use their bequests wisely, but notably did not include the warmth or detailed explanation present in my letter. They were cordial but distant, the letters of a man who was fulfilling obligation rather than expressing genuine closeness. The judge spent a long time reviewing all the evidence. Then he looked up, first at Claire and Daniel's attorney, then at them directly. The court finds no evidence whatsoever of undue influence or diminished capacity, he said, his voice firm and clear. Mr. Benjamin Jacobson was competent, clear in his intentions, and well within his rights to distribute his estate as he saw fit. The inequality of distribution is not evidence of impropriety. It is evidence of differing relationships, which is neither unusual nor illegal. This case is dismissed with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled. The will stands as written. Claire made a sound like a sob or a gasp. I could not tell which. Daniel sat stone-faced, staring at the table in front of him. Their attorney gathered his papers quickly, probably embarrassed by how thoroughly their case had been demolished. And I felt something release in my chest, something that had been tight and anxious for months. Relief, vindication, the official confirmation that I had done nothing wrong, that my inheritance was legitimately mine, that my uncle's wishes would be respected. Outside the courtroom, Claire and Daniel did not look at me, did not speak. They walked to their car and drove away, and I understood that this was likely the last time I would see them in any meaningful way. We were not siblings anymore, not really. We were just people who shared DNA and a childhood, connected now only by resentment and regret. Diana put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said. "Standing up for yourself, defending your uncle's wishes, refusing to be bullied. Those were all the right things. I know it hurts to lose your siblings, but Margaret, were they really present in your life before this? Or are you mourning an idea of family rather than the actual relationship?" She was right, of course. I was mourning an idea, a fantasy, a hope that we could have been closer, that they could have been the siblings I needed them to be. But the reality was that we had been distant for years, and the inheritance had not created that distance. It had just made it impossible to ignore. The months that followed were simultaneously the loneliest and most peaceful of my life. I was cut off from Claire and Daniel and the relatives who had sided with them, But I was also free from their demands, their guilt trips, their attempts to rewrite my relationship with Uncle Benjamin into something transactional and manipulative. I was alone but not lonely in the way I had been during cancer, because I was learning the difference between isolation and solitude, between being abandoned and choosing peace. I deepened my relationships with the people who had stood by me, my children and grandchildren, a few close friends from my nursing years, my neighbors who had helped during my sickness. I invested time and energy in these relationships, recognized them as my real family, the family I had chosen and who had chosen me, based on love rather than obligation or expectation of inheritance. I also started volunteering at a cancer support center, using my own experience to help others navigate the fear and uncertainty of diagnosis and treatment. This work was deeply meaningful to me, giving me purpose beyond just managing my inheritance, connecting me with other survivors who understood what I had been through. I shared my story carefully, talking about the financial stress of treatment, the importance of support systems, the way cancer forces you to evaluate what really matters. I did not talk about the inheritance with these new friends. That was private, not relevant to the work we were doing together. But I quietly funded programs and services through my charitable fund, made anonymous donations that paid for wigs and transportation and medication copays for people who were struggling the way I had struggled. One day, about a year after the court case, I was at the cancer center when a young woman approached me. She was probably in her 40s, bald from chemo, thin and tired-looking, but with bright eyes that suggested a fighter's spirit. She asked if we could talk privately, and we went to one of the small counseling rooms. She told me her story: breast cancer, stage 3, aggressive treatment, young children at home, a husband working 2 jobs to keep up with medical bills. She was drowning financially and emotionally, scared she would not survive, scared her kids would grow up without a mother, scared of everything. And then she said something that made me freeze. She said a friend had told her about an anonymous donor at the cancer center who had funded a patient assistance program, who had paid for her last round of chemo when her insurance denied coverage, who had made it possible for her to continue treatment without bankrupting her family. She wanted to know if I knew who this donor was, if there was a way to thank them, to express her gratitude for literally saving her life. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. I could not tell her it was me. The donations were meant to be anonymous, and I did not want credit or recognition. But I could tell her something else, something true and important. I told her that whoever this donor was, they had probably been where she was now, had probably known the fear and desperation of fighting cancer while worrying about money, and wanted to spare others that particular terror. I told her that the best way to thank this anonymous donor was to survive, to thrive, to be there for her children, and maybe someday when she was able, to help someone else in whatever way she could. I told her that this is what family is supposed to do: show up, help, care for each other, and that sometimes the universe provides that help through unexpected sources when our biological families fail us. She cried, and I cried, and we hugged in that small counseling room, 2 cancer survivors connected by suffering and healing and the mysterious ways that money can become love when used with intention and compassion. And I understood in that moment what Uncle Benjamin had really left me. Not just $8 million, but the ability to be for others what he had been for me. The ability to show up when people are at their most vulnerable. The ability to make a real difference in real lives. This realization transformed how I thought about the inheritance. It was not mine to hoard or to feel guilty about, or to split with people who had not earned it through relationship. It was mine to steward, to use wisely, to channel toward purposes that mattered. Uncle Benjamin had worked hard for decades to build his wealth, had lived modestly so he could save and invest, and had chosen to leave it to me because he trusted I would honor both the money and the values behind it. By using it to help cancer patients, to support my children, to fund causes that promoted education and literacy and health, I was honoring him more than any amount of money shared with resentful siblings ever could. I started thinking more intentionally about my own estate planning too. I was 68 now, healthy but aware of my mortality, conscious that my cancer could return or that I could die suddenly like Tom had. I wanted to make sure my own will reflected my values, my actual relationships, my intentions clearly stated so there could be no confusion or conflict. I worked with an estate attorney to create a comprehensive plan, The bulk of my estate would go to my children Robert and Lisa, divided equally because they had both shown up, both loved me, both earned their inheritance through years of genuine relationship. I set up educational trusts for my grandchildren that could not be touched for any other purpose. I designated significant amounts for the charities I cared about: cancer research, patient assistance, literacy programs, and I included detailed explanatory letters, just like Uncle Benjamin had done, explaining my reasoning, my values, my hopes for how the money would be used. I also did something Uncle Benjamin had not done. I had conversations with my children about my will while I was still alive and healthy. I told them exactly what I was planning and why, made sure they understood my intentions, gave them the chance to ask questions or express concerns. They were both supportive and grateful, assured me they cared more about having me in their lives than about any future inheritance, promised to honor my wishes when the time came. These conversations were emotional, but also deeply satisfying. I was not leaving mysteries or surprises that would have to be discovered after my death. I was being clear, honest, open about my plans, modeling the kind of communication I wished my Uncle Benjamin had been able to have with all of us before he died. Maybe it would not prevent all conflict. Money has a way of bringing out the worst in people, but at least I was doing everything in my power to make my intentions clear and my reasoning transparent. I also wrote letters to Claire and Daniel, though I never sent them. These letters were therapy exercises, ways to process my hurt and anger and disappointment in a safe space. I wrote about feeling abandoned during cancer, about the years of one-sided relationships where I had given and they had taken, about their sense of entitlement to inheritance they had not earned, about the pain of being accused of manipulation and undue influence by the very people who should have known me best and trusted me most. Writing these letters helped me understand that I was not angry about the money itself. I was angry about being unseen, unvalued, reduced to a dollar amount in their eyes. I was angry that they had never acknowledged their absence during my illness, never apologized for not showing up, never recognized that their current financial difficulties were not my responsibility to solve. I was angry that family had become a weapon they wielded against me rather than a bond that connected us, that they had chosen money over relationship and then blamed me for the choice. But I was also coming to a place of acceptance, even forgiveness, though not the kind of forgiveness that requires reconciliation. I was forgiving them for being human, flawed, limited in their capacity for empathy and selflessness. I was forgiving myself for expecting more than they could give, for holding on to hope for relationships that had been one-sided for years. And I was releasing the guilt that had plagued me in the early months, the feeling that I should have shared the inheritance despite Uncle Benjamin's clear wishes, despite their absence from my life, despite their willingness to destroy my reputation to get what they wanted. Dr. Reeves helped me understand that this kind of forgiveness was not about them. They probably did not think they needed forgiveness, probably still believed they were the wronged parties. This forgiveness was about me, about releasing the emotional weight I had been carrying, about choosing peace over vindication, about accepting that some relationships end, and that is okay, even when those relationships are with family. 2 years after Uncle Benjamin's death, I was living a life I could never have imagined during my cancer years. I had moved to a slightly larger house in a neighborhood I loved, with a garden where I could grow vegetables and flowers, with space for my grandchildren to visit and play. I was volunteering regularly, both at the cancer center and at a literacy program for adults. I was traveling occasionally, small trips, nothing extravagant, but seeing places I had always wanted to see and having experiences I had never been able to afford. I was dating someone, a gentleman named Paul, who was also a widower, who understood grief and survival and the complicated joy of finding companionship in later life. Most importantly, I was at peace, not happy in the simple, uncomplicated way people imagine happiness, but at peace with my choices, my relationships, my life. I had lost my siblings but gained clarity about what family really means. I had gained financial security but lost the fantasy of familial closeness I had been clinging to. I had honored my uncle's wishes despite enormous pressure to do otherwise, and in doing so had honored myself, my worth, my right to stand firm in my boundaries. I thought about Uncle Benjamin often, missed him in the way you miss people who truly saw you and loved you well. I like to think he would have been proud of how I used his gift, not just the money, but the permission he had given me to value myself, to stand up for what was right, to refuse to be diminished by people who claimed family while acting like adversaries. One afternoon, I was in my garden planting tomatoes when my daughter Lisa stopped by with my grandchildren. They ran around the yard, laughing and playing, full of the unself-conscious joy that children have when they feel safe and loved. Lisa and I sat on the porch watching them, drinking lemonade, talking about nothing important and everything important the way mothers and daughters do. "Mom," Lisa said at one point, "I want you to know something. I am proud of you for standing up to Claire and Daniel, for using Uncle Benjamin's money the way he wanted you to, for not letting them guilt you into something that would have been wrong. I know it was hard. I know you lost relationships that mattered to you. But you did the right thing, and I hope you know that." I felt tears prick my eyes, overwhelmed by the simple gift of being seen and validated by my daughter. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the grandchildren, feeling the spring sun warm on our faces, and I thought about inheritance, about what we passed down to the next generation. Uncle Benjamin had passed down money to me, yes, but more importantly, he had passed down values, the importance of showing up, of caring for people who are suffering, of using resources wisely and generously. And I was passing those same values down to my children and grandchildren, not just through money, but through example, through the choices I made, through the life I lived. The $8 million had changed my external circumstances dramatically, but the real inheritance, the one that mattered most, was the lesson that we get to choose what kind of people we want to be, what kind of family we want to create, what kind of legacy we want to leave. Blood does not determine family. Presence determines family. Love determines family. Showing up determines family. Claire and Daniel had taught me that lesson through their absence, through their demands, through their willingness to value money over relationship. Uncle Benjamin had taught me that lesson through his presence, his generosity, his careful planning to ensure I would be cared for. My children taught me that lesson through their love, their support, their lack of entitlement to what was mine. And I was learning that lesson every day at the Cancer Center, watching strangers become family through shared suffering and mutual support, seeing how money could facilitate love when used with intention and compassion. In the end, I learned that respect is not inherited through blood or demanded through guilt. It is earned through presence, through showing up, through loving people in their darkest moments and celebrating them in their brightest. I learned that boundaries are not selfish but necessary, that saying no to demands does not make you cruel, that protecting what is rightfully yours does not make you greedy. I learned that inheritance is about more than money. It is about values, wisdom, the courage to stand up for what is right even when everyone is telling you you are wrong. Most of all, I learned that family is not automatic. It is chosen every day through small acts of love, through showing up, through caring more about the person than about what they can give you. My siblings taught me what family is not. Uncle Benjamin taught me what family can be. And I am spending my remaining years creating family, not through biology or obligation, but through love, intention, and the conscious choice to be present for the people who matter. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and honoring yourself? Have you ever discovered that the people who claim to love you actually love what you can give them more than who you are? Have you ever learned that the greatest inheritance is not money, but the wisdom to know your own worth and the courage to stand up for it?